Thank you for coming. My name is Jay Doran. I'm the Education Director of the Equal Justice Coalition. And today I'm here with folks from Gallatin Public Affairs to give a training about the Justice for All campaign, which is promoting the Civil Legal Needs Study update. And we're going to give you an overview of the campaign and talk about our messaging and run you through a slide deck about the campaign or about the study and ask for your help in our work. So take it away, Michelle.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, small audience, and people on the phone really appreciate being here. I'm Michelle Cole. I am with Gallatin Public Affairs, Director of Content and Research. I worked with Jim Bamberger this summer, turning the survey results into the report that you've seen or heard about, posted online. I spent a lot of time with this material. I think there's some very important findings, and I'm glad to be here today to help train you on them.
Hi, I'm Alex Alston. So I'm part of the Gallatin team. I've been working with Jay, so with the EJC and also the Legal Foundation to launch our Justice for All campaign. And we are also missing part of our team who is our communications and media person, Eric Shadisky, and he has had a hand in a lot of our media to date. So we'll be channeling him as we're moving through some of the training here. So thanks.
Okay. So ready for the next. So our goals for today are to help you all become familiar with the Justice for All campaign, to go over the messages that we've developed at a very high level for the campaign, to offer you some tips for presentation, presentation training on how to present the results, talk about the results, to urge you and show you ways in which you can become part of the campaign, and to answer any questions that you have. Even if we can't answer them now, we will get back to you. So we want to make sure that you go away with a good knowledge and also your questions answered. At the conclusion of the training, and so that I want you to start thinking about this now, we will be asking where you would want to make a presentation and asking you to think about where you might be able to present, whether it's in your office or to other groups in your community, this information. So Jay is going to talk to you a little bit about the resources that you have available to you that are part of this campaign on the website.
So the success of all of this work is really a coordinated effort from people across the state who are able to speak passionately about the need for legal aid for low-income communities. So what we're trying to do is provide people with a lot of different resources to do that. So if you go to this website, it's on the EJC's page, ejc.org/justiceforall. You'll find a ton of information about the campaign, from the original press release that was sent out on October 29th to the report and one-pager about the study. You'll also find a copy of the PowerPoint that we're going to go through today, key messages. There's a social media toolkit. There will be later this week, there'll be examples of letters to the editor that you could send to your local paper. So there are a bunch of different tools that we have available for you to be able to plug in your community and help us get the message about the study and the importance of legal aid out across Washington State. That being said, if there's anything missing or you have any questions about anything up on this website, please don't hesitate to contact me, and my information is actually available on the website, so you can find that contact information there.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so the slide that you're looking at now, this is it's a collection of titles from the earned media stories that have happened so far. There are definitely some stories missing, and as of Sunday, there's also an editorial in the Olympian that's our most recent story to come out. But I thought before we jump in, as Jay just described, I mean, this is the Justice for All campaign really needs everybody's buy-in and a lot more work as we're building awareness moving forward here. But I'm going to describe a little bit the beginning of the campaign and our launch and kind of what has come so far. So starting on October 28th, an email and an announcement of the study went out to VIPs, so that was a list of legislators, stakeholders, and it was accompanied by a letter it was a joint letter by former AG Rob McKenna and also our current AG Bob Ferguson. And the following day, October 29th, was our statewide rollout, and we announced the study update through a KUOW public radio story, and that was heard statewide. And the day after that, October 30th, we had our first media availability, and that took place in the Seattle media market. And I'll just describe what the media availabilities how they came together and kind of our strategy with those. But there's been 5 of them so far. Each one was equipped with a client, so someone who had experienced a civil legal need problem and then had also received help through civil legal aid. A provider, so someone who was on the front lines, understood the need intimately. And then also a community leader, and that person we were calling our champion, so that's somebody who could be an advocate for the study update and also civil legal aid. So at each of these, there was a couple hours blocked out where press was invited. They showed up and were able to have conversations with everybody who was there and willing to share their story and their experiences. And from that, you can see with putting the titles up there, we're hoping to kind of depict what resonated with the press, with our public, and definitely putting the human face on the numbers that the study, the story was what was most significant. So November 9th, we had a media availability in Bellingham, and then November 10th, there were 3 more in Spokane, Olympia, and Yakima. And so so far there's been 12 stories placed. We're still working on a few more stories right now. And anyway, we're hoping that with this you can share these stories on your social networks, but they also are stories of clients who've had civil legal need problems, have gotten help, and so those can hopefully help you share the story as well. And this was Creme TV in Spokane picked up the story of, so the client here was a teen child client, and she had dealt with homelessness as a teen and really turned her life around with the help of Teen Child Services. So we won't play this, it's about a 3-minute clip, but it's definitely available on the ejc.org website. Okay.
Thank you, Alex. So on the website, you'll see a number of key messages. What I wanted to talk about here are the kind of the 10,000-foot level messages, the messages that we're hoping that people take away about this report and the need. One of the purpose of doing key messages is so that you're able to focus on what do we need to talk about in this report, but we are not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that you use these exact words. The most compelling storytelling, the way you connect with people on this issue, is to tell these stories in your own words and with your own experience. And that's a theme that you'll hear us talk about a lot today. But let me just go through the 4 top-line messages that we've arrived at, and the media is picking them up, which is great to hear, or great to read. There's a serious justice gap in Washington State, and we're looking at 500,000 men, women, and children who don't get help that they need when they're faced with legal problems. The need is growing. This is a second study. The first study that was ever conducted in the state was in 2003, And then it found that low-income households had on average 3.3 civil legal problems a year. This most recent study found 9.3. So it's nearly tripled in a decade. So the trend is going the wrong way. Again, the majority of people facing their problems alone. There are a couple reasons. Part of it is just access and capacity within the system. The study also points out that people don't know necessarily that the problem they have has a legal dimension. So that's some education that will need to be done. And finally, this is a more global message, but none of us in Washington State will have justice if there isn't fair and equal access to justice for all. And this is a point that I think is worth making and really resonates with people emotionally. I just want to talk a little bit about why success in this campaign matters. The Washington State University did survey research in late 2014. After people filled out the survey, they were asked if they wanted to offer any comments, and more than 400 did offer comments. And I reviewed them in preparation for the report and have included some of those quotes as anonymous quotes, not their names, in the report. And it was pretty heart-wrenching to read some of them. There were people who were so desperate for help. They were asking on the survey instrument, hey, can you help my grandmother? Or can you help me? I've lost my job. There were also people, and these quotes on the slide were taken from that list. There were also quotes from people who had no faith at all that the survey that they just completed and that the work that we were engaging in was going to help at all. And so I wanted to include this slide to give us a sense of why we need to make a difference with this campaign. So we've assembled a couple of tips. This is specifically for this presentation, but really they're generic enough whenever you're presenting information. These are good things to keep in mind. First of all, to know who you're speaking to, know who's in the audience, and this presentation and any presentation you give can be tailored to those interests. For example, there are some very interesting findings in the study about victims of domestic violence or sexual assault. You may, in an audience of advocates in that area, decide to tailor a presentation or your speech with those findings. So it's good to, before you start, think about who you're talking to and what you think they want and need to hear. To find the goal of your presentation for yourself and for the audience. It's always a good idea to go in telling them, what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell it again. Be yourself and have a conversation. And this goes back to my point about the messaging. We're not trying to put words in your mouth. You need to understand the findings, but then be able to communicate it in a way that you're most comfortable, that are in your own words. And finally, especially in this case, closing with a headline and a call to action. We have found in the presentations we've made and the reporter contacts we've had, people want to know, what can I do? This is kind of depressing. So we need to give them tools, whether it's give money, write a legislator, post on your social media, give this presentation. You need to close with giving people the tools to help. And then finally, to leave time for questions and answers, because sometimes the most important information that you convey is in that period. Now we go to the J. Michelle portion of our show here. We're going to start going through the deck.
Would you like the...
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, so as Michelle said, in just a moment, we're going to go through the slide deck that we've created to cover the key findings of the study. But before we jump into that, just want to take a moment to reiterate the importance of humanizing all of this data and humanizing the study. It really is the stories that are going to compel people to take action and can compel people to make the change that we need. We've seen that with all of the earned media so far that we highlighted earlier. They all feature a client story or two, and it's really that which makes this relatable, and that which allows us to approach this from a place of, this is really helping someone, and we can make a difference. So I know that a lot of the people that are probably going to present this presentation are providers, and so they're much closer to the work than I am, and have, I'm sure, a number of stories running through their mind that relate to the findings of the study that they can very quickly access and rattle off. I of course don't. Not being an attorney and not working with clients, I rely on all of you to provide me with the stories from the work you do. But I did want to take a second and just share a story from my work on the study and this campaign that I can speak to as my own experience, as just kind of an example or a model of how you might incorporate stories into this presentation. During the months this summer when Michelle was putting together the actual report itself, I worked closely with her to identify clients across the state that had stories that touched on some of the key findings. And one of the clients that we spoke to is a woman out in Kipsack County who I'll refer to as Anna. These clips on the slide are taken directly from the study itself, I think page 4 or 5. And Michelle and I spent, I don't know, maybe 30, 45 minutes on the phone with Anna, and she just very courageously and vulnerably was willing to open up to us and share her story, which, not to give it credit for her hardship, but essentially was her experience of making sure that her abusive ex-partner did not gain custody of their daughter. And it was a struggle, to say the least. She ended up actually losing her job as a result of it because she spent so much time in court or doing research on her own. It wasn't until very late in her process that she actually connected to the Kitsap volunteer program and was able to actually receive some help. But for the longest time, she was doing all of this on her own. And I think the most compelling part of all of this was towards the end of our conversation with Anna, she broke down and she just couldn't contain her emotions anymore. And it wasn't from a place of wanting support or needing us to console her. It was from a place of, what she said was something to the extent of, I'm just so happy that I was able to protect myself and my daughter. And that's powerful, and it was acknowledged by her, and it's a result of the help of legal aid that she was able to protect herself and her daughter. And there's a lot of very, very sobering data that was collected from this study, but it's not without these types of stories that we can really speak to the power of legal aid. So that's just one example. So as we go through this presentation, think about how you might try to weave in stories to different parts of the presentation. And Michelle and I are just gonna kind of walk step by step. We're not actually gonna give the presentation itself, but we're gonna kind of talk very high level on some key points that we'd recommend that you touch on when giving this presentation.
And we do have key points prepared and available for you.
There's this one.
Here's yours.
Oh, this one's mine.
Yeah. On the website, and that come with the presentation, so don't think that you have to take notes or remember all of this. We sat down and thought we'd go through the presentation and maybe the very high level for each slide. This is the cover of the study and the cover slide of the presentation, was based on a survey that Washington State University's Social and Economic Sciences Research Center conducted statewide in late 2014. And it's representative of the low-income population statewide. It is, at this time, the most rigorous study of its kind in the country of civil legal needs.
For the second slide, you'll notice on the talking points, there's several bullet points about how you can deliver this. I think as you'll notice with a lot of these slides, they're very there's not much language, which is intentional. So a lot of what you'll be presenting is not actually on the slide, and we encourage you not necessarily to read what's on the slide, but to add in language. So what I would focus on, and what I've focused on in the times that I've given this, is noting that, yes, this is the first look since 2003, and the 2003 study really helped to catalyze a decade-long emphasis of the importance of legal aid, and our state legislature responded appropriately and has, as a result, and partially as a result of the study, stepped up funding for legal aid. And a lot's changed since 2003, and hence we felt the need to do another study to get a full understanding. Specifically, what I like highlighting as far as what's changed is the poverty population in our state. So from 2003 to 2014, the state's population living at or below 125% of the poverty level has increased by more than 40%. It's gone from about 875,000 people living in that level to about 1.25 million. And that's I think the biggest change. You can also note just the changes in our economy with the Great Recession as being a factor of that, but really I would just touch on the poverty population having changed significantly. For this next slide, it really speaks to itself. What you're trying to do is draw the comparison between the 2003 study and the 2014 study, noting that the average number of legal problems per household has nearly tripled, and also noting that the percentage of low-income people in our state that experience at least one legal problem is relatively the same. A couple areas where I have received questions about from this slide in particular is you'll notice in the 2003 study, as the households experience at least one legal problem, it gives a range, 75 to 79%. The best way to explain this is the methodology between the two studies is slightly different. And so in 2003, the way in which the data was collected, the way to represent the data was through a range. And I would just keep it that simple. It also speaks to how methodologically rigorous this 2014 study is. The second question that I often receive is, how is there such a disparity in the number of problems over the course of the last decade? And how can someone experience nine civil legal problems in a 12-month period? The simplest way to answer that is, one of the key findings is that these problems are interrelated and connected, and can often spiral into other problems. And just because someone experiences 9 problems doesn't mean that they're all separate legal problems. For instance, a person in a domestic violence situation could go through multiple parenting plans or protection orders within a 12-month period, and those are all considered legal problems in a year.
This is one of the more, when I first looked at the results, these findings were very interesting to me. The changes in the types of problems that people have. Healthcare was the #1 most prevalent civil legal problem of the low-income population here in Washington. The other thing that is interesting and is highlighted in this slide is, while healthcare is the #1 problem, people tend to seek legal advice for housing. There's a disconnect between the most frequent, the most common problems, and the problems that people seek help for. And this also points to the need for education and awareness and tailoring programs to help people confront and solve their most common problems.
So one way that I like to step into this slide, and really these next 2 slides, is as kind of a segue, is mentioning that, in addition to measuring the type and prevalence of civil legal problems that low-income Washingtonians face, the study also was designed. The study was also designed to measure whether people experience problems differently as a result of different identities, such as race, ability, sexual orientation, etc. And really what we found is, yes, they do. So what this graph represents are racial groups, the way racial groups experience different types of civil legal problems. So do whatever works for your style. I might recommend that you explain the graph just as I did, and then you take a second to really make sure everyone understands what each line is representing. So clicking through and saying, this line represents how people that identify as white experience the rates at which they experience different legal problems. This line represents people that identify as Asian, people that identify as Hispanic or Latino, people that identify as Black, and people that identify as Native American. And what you're really trying to highlight here is the study found that people that identify as African American or Native American report disproportionately high levels of civil legal problems in comparison to their other counterparts. This next slide is another way a similar way to look at this information. So what this graph is showing is how different racial groups feel they were discriminated or treated unfairly based on different identities. So it's not representative of a specific legal problem, but it's saying people from this racial group feel like they have been treated unfairly as a result of race or color, national origin, religion, et cetera, et cetera. And again, you can click through and identify what each line is. So I think we start off with people that identify as Asian, people that identify as white, Hispanic or Latino, Black or African American, and Native American. And again, what you're highlighting here is that people that identify as Black or Native American experience disproportionately high levels of discrimination and unfair treatment across a number of different identities. There are a few, I guess the last thing I note is especially on slide 6, there are a few statistics that are in the talking point that aren't represented on this graph that I would highlight, and really it's the first two. So the first one is 44% of all respondents reported at least one problem involving discrimination or unfair treatment, and of these, 77 experienced discrimination on the basis of a legally protective status.
So discrimination based on a past bankruptcy, criminal record, juvenile history is supposed to be outlawed or at the very least discouraged in this state. But the study results show that among the low-income population, there are still high levels of discrimination based on data tracking. And again, we find that African Americans and Native Americans, including also people with disabilities and victims of domestic violence, experience substantially higher levels of discrimination and unfair treatment due to this kind of data tracking. And this is an interesting finding. It may be something that unto itself you want to elevate in a presentation, depending on the group to talk about.
And actually, can I go back? Actually, for the slides, for this slide and the prior two that focus on discrimination and unfair treatment, we do have additional information and additional slides that we can provide if you were to do a presentation where you'd want to kind of expand on that information a little bit more. So if that's something that you're interested in, just ask and we can kind of help provide that. So.
I mentioned earlier the findings around victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and this slide shows just the horrendous problems that these individuals and families are facing in this area. This group, proportionately per capita, had the highest number of issues, of civil legal issues. And they do tend to be interrelated. A family court problem can lead to, a work discrimination can lead to health problems, can lead to high bills and your inability to pay them. So it's a fairly compelling, very sad slide, but one of the findings in this study that really calls for some action.
And I think a good spot to reiterate that while the average number of civil legal problems experienced by low-income households was 9.3. For survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, the average was 19.7. Another statistic that's not represented on this page, or this slide, but is extremely powerful and people should hear.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the next two slides are an opportunity to summarize a little bit and just emphasize that the justice gap is growing. On this slide in particular, I think on the talking points under slide 9 and 10, I think the second bullet point is really helpful, just saying that, over 3/4 of low-income individuals and families will face significant problems with no legal help at all. And for the providers that are making this presentation, I think this is a good opportunity for you to speak to your personal experiences with this. One example I can think of is in the Yakima Herald released a story, I think just last week as a result of our media availability event that we had on the 10th. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think NJP's Elizabeth Touche made a comment about how, they've received, I don't know, it was something outrageous, like 20-some calls just today for legal assistance, and they know that they can only take about 5 people this week. So it's maybe just anecdotally a good chance to highlight how expansive the need is and how little of that need we're able to meet at our current levels. And then going into the next slide, part of the issue is, and what we're highlighting here is that a lot of people don't understand that their problems have legal dimension, which is how we can account for the fact that 65% of those that took the survey didn't seek help at all. And then the hint of good news, the good news takeaway from here is that while only 24% of households received at least some help with one or more of their legal problems, we do know that legal aid works. Of those that received help, 17% reported that the help they received completely and fully resolved their problem, while 44% said that at least partially resolved it. So we know that 60+% of people that receive legal aid are getting help that actually works.
Although here's the glass half empty portion of that message. While we know that getting legal aid, legal assistance works and helps people solve their problems, the people who are experiencing these problems do not have faith or confidence that the justice system is going to help them at all. And this slide, which is probably one of the most depressing slides in this deck, really highlights that we know it works, it can work, but there's a whole group of potential people who could be helped who don't think it'll work at all.
Okay, so excuse me. This is the opportunity to bring everything home. So you have just gone through the last 10, 11 slides, laid out the key findings of the study, and this is where we start, I guess, expanding on the significance of what this means. So this is our challenge. We know that currently in Washington State there's only one legal aid attorney for every almost 11,000 eligible people, eligible Washingtonians eligible to receive legal aid services, and this is more than half the nationally recognized minimum, not optimum, but minimum level of access of 1 to every 5,000 eligible people. So this isn't good enough. And as Michelle talked about earlier, this quote up here is just one of the responses that one of the survey responders, left, basically asking, is this going to do anything? Like, is anyone ever going to get the help they need? And our answer has to be yes, and it has to be yes so that everyone in Washington State can have equal justice and equal access to justice. And this is also a great time to weave in another client story. I mean, this is the quote here is is meant to humanize it a little bit, but if you can add even just a tiny little vignette of how the work you've done or the work of legal aid helps someone, it's very impactful. And this last slide is a recent addition and can change, and something that I can do and the EJC can do is help you add in and adjust slides, especially ending slides, depending on your audience. But really, what this is doing is showing what the justice gap looks like in terms of money. So we know that we have across the state about 107 legal aid attorneys, staffed legal aid attorneys, which brings us to that attorney to client ratio that I just spoke about. And what we need to get to the 1 to 5,000 ratio is about an additional 124 attorneys, so for a total of 232. And we have estimated that would cost an additional $15.5 million per year. So this is how it looks on paper, and this is an opportunity in your presentation to identify the need differently, and then go into your ask for the audience, and that can be any number of things depending on who the audience is.
So this is a marathon and not a sprint, first of all. We'd like you to leave today, to finish today, thinking about what are the many things that you can do. First of all, who are the two groups? Maybe it's your organization, the board you volunteer on, your own internal group, whoever in your community that you can make this presentation to. We're also urging, some of this is going to take government and legislative action to solve. So we need people and your neighbors and your friends to be speaking out, to be voicing your concern for the situation that we have today. And again, I mentioned early on, we can help you with that, and Jay might want to talk a little bit too about EJC standing by and helping you with that.
Yeah, so we've identified a number, probably about 24 members in our state legislature that we think will be very influential and can be impactful in any sort of ask that we have of the state to increase state funding. And so what we've been trying to do and have started to do is organize groups of people that are constituents of those legislators to schedule a meeting and go present this information to their representatives and senators or senator. And that doesn't mean necessarily scheduling a time to give this presentation, but to give some the key messages, a copy of the study, maybe the one-pager. And what the EJC can help you do is not only schedule those meetings, but also potentially be there with you or send another representative to join you for those meetings. And so this is just one other step that we're taking to constantly beat that drum and make sure that the importance of this study and the importance of this need is heard by those that have the ability to make the change that we need to see.
So here's the tell you again portion of the presentation as we wrap up and get ready to take your questions. We hope that you are more familiar with the Justice for All campaign, the messaging around that campaign, and the tools available to you, and that you know where to find them. Also, hope that you go away from this presentation with a commitment to give the presentation to someone and to become an advocate. It's very important that you and others do so. Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much for taking your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you for being in the audience. Please, we're going to post this video and this presentation on the website as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Great.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks.